The scent of cinnamon and apples still wrapped around the kitchen as he muttered, "You've outstayed your welcome, Mom." Still, I rinsed the dish, hands steady in warm water, the pie untouched behind me. As silence swelled louder than the insult, the smell thickened, bitter now, clinging to walls that once felt like mine. The same pie I baked every year sat uncut, golden crust cooling like a witness. That's when I understood. They didn't push me out. I stepped back to take the deed with me, so I left without a sound, and 2 weeks later stopped the sale with my signature. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The smell of cinnamon and apples filled the kitchen, clinging to the warm air like a promise. Diane adjusted the pie on the cooling rack, careful not to disturb the crimped edges. She had made it from scratch, Lena's favorite, just like every birthday since she was 2. Outside, the sky hung low, October clouds rolling in over the quiet Illinois cul-de-sac. The house looked the same from the curb, tasteful gray siding, manicured lawn, faux seasonal wreath on the door. But inside, something had shifted. "Store-bought," Tracy said briskly, setting a plastic cake container on the island with a thud. "From that bakery Lena likes on Jefferson, just in case." Diane blinked. "Oh, that's thoughtful." Her voice caught, and she smoothed it with a smile. Tracy didn't look up. She was already arranging napkins like it was a magazine shoot. "We'll just do cake after presents. Keep it simple." Diane glanced at the pie. Golden, still warm, still untouched. She didn't say a word. Mark walked in, phone in hand, pausing just long enough to toss a glance around the cluttered kitchen. His mouth twitched. "Is this all staying out?" "I'll clean it," Diane said gently, reaching for the mixing bowl still in the sink. She moved quietly, trying not to clang anything, even though the metal felt heavy in her hands. Behind her, Lena shrieked with delight from the living room. "Grandma, you wrapped it with unicorn paper." Diane smiled, rinsing the spatula under cold water. At least someone still noticed. Dinner was polite. Tracy talked mostly to Mark about Lena's school fundraiser. Mark made a show of checking his email mid-meal. Diane offered a story about Lena's first words. Tracy corrected her. Twice, Lena laughed at something Diane said, and Tracy immediately changed the subject. It was subtle, but deliberate, like a steady drip wearing downstone. After cake, store-bought, overly sweet, but praised nonetheless. Mark leaned against the counter while Diane scraped plates into the trash. His voice was soft, almost idle. "You've kind of outstayed your welcome, Mom." The words hung in the air, cold and surgical. Diane didn't turn around right away. Her hands were submerged in soapy water, the dish rag floating beside her wrist. She stared out the small kitchen window. A single orange leaf spiraled past the glass. "I see," she said, finally. Her voice barely carried over the hum of the dishwasher. Tracy didn't say anything. Diane dried her hands, walked to the pie, and placed a lid over it. Not a single slice was missing. She packed in silence. It didn't take long. Her suitcase was still half-zipped from 2 weeks ago when she arrived to help out after Lena's cough turned into the flu. In the guest room, she folded the blanket she'd bought for herself, the one Tracy said clashed with the decor. She zipped her bag. Her fingers trembled only once. Lena appeared at the door in her pajamas, hugging a stuffed raccoon. "Are you going to your house?" Diane knelt, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. "Just for a bit, sweetheart." "Can I visit you tomorrow?" Diane paused, then smiled. "We'll see." She kissed her forehead and stood. Lena watched her, quiet. At the front door, Mark didn't bother looking up from his phone. Tracy offered a stiff half-hug and murmured, "Drive safe." The porch light flickered as Diane stepped out, suitcase rolling behind her. The air had turned sharp, the kind that hinted at frost overnight. Her car waited at the curb, a dull shadow beneath the street lamp. She opened the trunk, set the pie down gently, and then paused. A voice behind her, small, certain. "Grandma," Diane turned. Lena stood barefoot on the porch, holding something in her hands. The raccoon. The hum of the tires was the only sound in the car. Diane drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes locked on the wet road, headlights slicing through the drizzle. The birthday pie sat on the passenger seat beside her, the foil clinking softly with every turn. 40 minutes outside the cul-de-sac, past the rows of shuttered gas stations and nameless warehouse buildings, she pulled into the parking lot of a low, flat-roofed extended-stay hotel. The neon sign buzzed, Harbor Inn and Suites, weekly rates. Inside, the room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the distant ghost of cigarettes, beige walls, an over-polished table. A bed too stiff to be inviting, a kitchenette with exactly one pan. Nothing familiar, nothing personal. Diane set her suitcase down carefully, like she didn't want to offend the silence. She placed the pie on the counter, still untouched. From her bag, she pulled a file folder, slightly bent at the edges, the kind printed with marbled navy paper from a cheap law office printer. She'd never needed it. Not really, until now. Diane sat down at the small table and opened it. Property title, 147 Windmere Lane, Bloomington, IL. Her name was printed neatly beneath her late husband's. Her finger hovered over the line. They had bought the house together after the cancer diagnosis, after they sold the farm. Closer to Tracy, closer to the hospital, closer to help, Tracy had said. But it was Diane who cooked, Diane who cleaned, Diane who held him as the chemo wasted him away. After he died, Diane hadn't wanted to be alone. Tracy had said it made sense for her to stay, said it helped Lena to have her around, said it was what Dad would have wanted. That was 6 years ago. She turned the page. Mortgage refinance, never completed. Name removed from utilities, but not from title. Ownership, Diane Harper, 62%. She stared at the paper until the words blurred. Not outstayed, not a guest. Footsteps above her room, someone pacing, a muffled laugh. A TV flickered behind the wall. Diane closed the folder and pulled out her phone. 2 missed calls from Jules. She tapped her name. Diane? Jules's voice was warm, crackling slightly over Bluetooth. Did you leave? An hour ago. Jesus, you okay? A long pause. Then Diane exhaled. He said I'd outstayed my welcome. Oh, honey. You didn't outstay anything. Jules didn't miss a beat. You let them stay. Diane leaned back in the hard chair. He said it in front of the pie. Burn the pie. Diane laughed softly, then grew quiet. I have the paperwork, she said, from the original title. You want me to look at it? I already know what it says. You gonna tell them? Not yet. Jules didn't push. You need anything tonight? No, Diane said, but I will need something tomorrow. They hung up. The hotel room pressed in around her. Diane got up, pulled the curtains shut, and turned on the small lamp by the bed. The warmth of it wasn't real, but it was enough. She sat back at the table. Then she opened her contacts and scrolled until she found Hank Wilmer, attorney. He picked up after 3 rings. Diane, you okay? I need to know my legal position, she said, tonight. I assume this is about the Windmere property. Yes. There was the sound of a chair scraping on the other end, then a series of keyboard taps. Okay, let's see. You were never bought out, and Mark never refinanced under his name? No, I would have had to sign. You didn't? No. Then it's simple, Hank said. You're not just on the deed, Diane. You're the majority title holder. She said nothing for a long moment. Just listened to the fridge click on behind her. Can they evict me? She asked quietly. Not without evicting themselves. She let that sit. Thank you, Hank. You call me if you need more than advice, okay? I will. She ended the call. The pie was still there, untouched. Diane took it to the trash, stood over it for a moment, then set it gently inside, still in the tin. She didn't slam the lid, just let it close. Outside the window, the rain had started in earnest. Steady, clean. She turned off the light, lay on the bed without undressing, and stared up at the ceiling. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel rage. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt awake. And somewhere, beneath all that quiet, a decision was beginning to form. Saturday morning arrived with a low sky and damp air that clung to everything. Diane pulled her rental SUV into the driveway of 147 Windmere Lane just after 10. The same tasteful gray siding, the same seasonal wreath, now updated to faux autumn leaves. A welcome mat that used to be hers, now slightly faded. The garage was open. Her boxes sat neatly stacked near the side door, marked in black Sharpie. Guest room, DH. Not mom's room, not upstairs, just guest. The boxes looked smaller than they had leaving the house. Tracy stepped out, phone in hand, Starbucks cup balanced in the other. I hope this makes the move easier, she said, gesturing toward the boxes like they were parting gifts from a hotel concierge. It does, Diane said. Her voice was calm. Thank you. She didn't mention the chipped pie dish sitting on top, lid loose, one handle broken clean off. She didn't mention the pile of her old mail, catalogs, bank statements, a birthday card from a cousin, with her name scratched out in pen. Not blacked out, crossed out. The kind of detail you don't notice unless you're supposed to. She picked up a box, holding it close to her chest like something breakable lived inside. Mark never appeared. Tracy lingered by the doorway, sipping her latte. Lena's at ballet, she offered. But she made you something. Diane said nothing, just nodded once and moved toward the car. It took 3 trips. On the last, she spotted it, folded next to the cardboard and tied with twine. Her original welcome mat, not the one Tracy had replaced it with. All cursive and target clean. This one was fraying at the edges, sun-faded, the H in hello half rubbed away by a decade of feet. The mat Diane had picked out after Jim died. The one she and Lena used to stomp snow off of before coming inside. She took that too. Tracy didn't stop her. Back at the Harbor Inn, Diane unpacked quietly. She placed one ceramic mug beside the sink, a single frame photo on the nightstand, Lena at 4, messy hair, frosting on her cheek. Diane beaming behind her. She hung 2 cardigans in the closet and pushed the rest of the clothes under the bed in their box. She wasn't staying. Not really. She just needed to be close. The boxes labeled guest room she didn't even open. That afternoon, she took 3 of them to the local donation center. Pillows, photo albums she knew no one had touched in years. Knickknacks Tracy had once deemed a little dated. At Goodwill, she stood for a full minute, watching a teenager pick up the ceramic angel she'd once kept above her kitchen sink. The girl turned it in her hands, then dropped it into her basket. Another box she took to a consignment shop downtown. The last one, marked important, she opened slowly. Inside were birth certificates, death certificates, the deed, a ring dish from her wedding, Lena's first drawing of Grandma's house, and a folded letter on lavender stationery. She hadn't written it. She unfolded it gently. I miss when the house smelled like you. A heart drawn in purple marker. Love, Lena. No signature from Tracy. No emoji from a phone. Just a child's handwriting, left behind like contraband. Diane pressed the note to her chest. She didn't cry. Later that night, she made tea in her one ceramic mug. The hotel kitchenette hissed under the old burner coil. She sat on the bed, socks pulled up, knees tucked in, and stared out the window. She didn't want the house back. She didn't want revenge. Not in the way movies pretended people did. What she wanted was clarity. To watch Tracy look at her one day and understand what she gave away. The lock, the smell of cinnamon, the girl who used to run to the door. Diane picked up her phone, scrolled past Jules, past Hank, then paused. New contact. She typed, Reclamation, Phase 1, and below it, Patricia, Estate Consultant. She hit save, then stared at the glowing screen a moment longer. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, the boxes were fewer now, cleaner, lighter, and somewhere, less than 5 miles away, Lena was probably brushing her teeth, tracing her fingers along the edges of a note that wasn't supposed to be delivered. The notary's pen scratched across the paper like a whisper of finality. Diane sat straight-backed at the corner table of the estate office, reading every line of the reaffirmation packet. Her signature flowed steady and clean across the bottom of page 3. Then again on page 5. The office smelled faintly of pine cleaner and dry toner. A framed certificate behind the receptionist's desk hung slightly crooked. And Diane found herself staring at it between signatures, focusing on that one quiet imperfection in a room built to feel controlled. Hank sat across from her, glasses low on his nose, flipping through duplicates as she signed. This one, he said, rotating another page toward her, formally confirms what's already true. Your name, your percentage, your right to either retain or dissolve joint tenancy. No one can dispute it now. Diane pressed her pen to the page, signed. Hank gathered the documents like a dealer collecting cards. I'll file the partition notice with the county by Monday. It's procedural, but it signals intent. You either take occupancy or you force a sale. I know what it means, Diane said. Her voice was soft but ironed flat. He nodded. Just making sure you're ready. I've been ready longer than I realized. Later, Jules met her at the coffee shop on Jefferson, the one with high windows, brick walls, and scones the size of softballs. Diane's mug of coffee sat between them, her hands wrapped around the ceramic, like it radiated warmth straight into her chest. Jules leaned back, arms crossed, watching her with the careful eyes of someone who had known her for 3 decades, and still didn't want to say too much too soon. You've given them a comfort they didn't earn, Jules said finally. Diane stirred her coffee once, counterclockwise. Not anymore. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to rise. The power was in the restraint. You're really doing it. Diane nodded, lips tight. They thought I'd fade out. They wanted to shame me into letting go. Jules leaned forward. You know this'll escalate things. It already has, Diane said. They just haven't noticed yet. At 2:14 p.m., her phone buzzed once. Mark. Thinking of adding a second story next spring. You think that'll pass HOA? No. Hi. No. Hope you're well. No acknowledgement of the boxes, the chipped pie dish, or the fact that the person he'd just texted now had legal authority to dismantle the foundation beneath his mortgage. Diane looked at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she locked the phone and turned it face down. Across from her, a young couple fed bites of cake to their toddler. The boy smeared frosting across his cheek and laughed when it got on his nose. The woman took a picture. The man reached out to fix the baby's bib. Diane sipped her coffee slowly. Behind her eyes, something shifted, calm but irreversible. That night, she sat cross-legged on the floor of the hotel suite, with the welcome mat unfolded in front of her, the one they'd discarded like a throwaway menu. She traced the worn rubber edges, the faded H, the faint outline where a muddy boot had once landed and left part of a winter behind. She wasn't going back in through the front door. She wasn't waiting to be invited. She was changing the locks. The call came at 8:07 a.m. Diane was buttering toast in the kitchenette, morning light slanting through the dusty hotel blinds, when her phone buzzed, then rang. She let it vibrate once in her palm before answering. Mark, she said, calm as tea steam. What the hell is this? His voice came hard and fast, like he hadn't slept. You're suing me? Diane set the butter knife down with a quiet clink. No, she said. I'm asserting my rights. He scoffed. Partition? That's legalese for lawsuit. It's legalese for co-ownership, she replied. Which I still have. Which I never surrendered. Which you've built your life on. A beat of silence stretched out. She could almost hear the calculations racing in his head. You're doing this to Tracy, he said, voice colder now. No, Diane said. I'm doing this because of Tracy. And you. He exhaled sharply. You want money? Is that it? I want acknowledgement, she said. The kind you can't scratch out with a pen. Then she ended the call. By 10:11, an email appeared in her inbox. Subject: so disappointed. The message was long. Pages of passive-aggressive prose spun in polite font. Tracy's signature was at the bottom, but Diane could hear Mark in every line. We're blindsided. You could have come to us first. We thought you were family, not a threat. Lena's confused. She doesn't understand why Grandma's being so cold. Diane read it once. Then again, slower. She clicked reply, typed 2 lines. Please see attached. DH. Then she uploaded the PDF of the deed and hit send. At noon, she walked through Miller's Bakery, choosing a croissant and a seat by the window. Outside, leaves scuttled across the sidewalk. A couple argued quietly at the counter about gluten. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number, except she recognized the writing. Is this because of me? Lena, Dad's phone. Diane stared at the screen for a long moment. Her reflection ghosted faintly in the glass. Then she typed back. Never, not one part of this is because of you. You are the only thing I'd never undo. A moment passed, then a heart emoji appeared. No words, just a small red heart. Back at the hotel, Diane pulled the welcome mat out from under her bed and laid it flat on the carpet again. Her phone rang once more. This time, the number was unfamiliar. "Diane Harper," the voice on the line asked. "Yes. This is Charles Levin. I represent Mark and Tracy Carpenter. I'd like to speak with your attorney." Her lips curled, almost imperceptibly. "You'll want Hank Wilmer. I'd prefer to avoid court." "You're not the only one," she said, then gave him the number. When the call ended, Diane leaned back in her chair and looked out the window. Things were moving now. Real pieces on the board. Not just talk, not just simmering. Leverage. And still, the house stood at 147 Windmere Lane. Oblivious, for now, but doors open. Locks change. And under the perfect gray siding, someone had just started to sweat. The email was short, factual, cold. "Dear Ms. Harper, this message is to inform you that preliminary documents regarding the pending sale of 147 Windmere Lane were received this morning. Please contact us directly with any questions regarding your co-ownership status." It was signed by the title officer at Elmwood Realty. Mark and Tracy had tried to sell the house. Without her. Diane stood in the kitchenette, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the counter. She didn't pace. She didn't curse. She opened her laptop, pulled up her file folder titled Property Legal, and attached the scanned deed. Then she drafted a single sentence. "This sale cannot proceed without my notarized signature. As 62% majority owner, I will not be signing." She hit send. No drama. No exclamation points, just fact. 2 hours later, Jules texted her a screenshot. A Facebook post, set to friends only, but visible enough. Family can be so unpredictable, especially when you think you've done everything right and they turn around and punish you anyway. Not everyone wants to be a villain. Some of us are just trying to build a life. No names, no context, but Diane knew. Jules had added a caption. "She thinks she's subtle. You okay?" Diane typed back. "More than okay. I'm expected now. That's a shift." That evening, Diane stood in front of the fridge at 147 Windmere Lane. She was alone. The house was listed but not yet staged. Tracy and Mark had taken Lena out. Dinner and a movie, according to the realtor's auto message. The key Diane used wasn't new. It was the one she'd carried for 6 years. She had every legal right to enter. The kitchen looked the same. Too clean, too curated. But the magnet arrangement was off. The kid art that usually clung to the fridge, Lena's wobbly unicorns, last spring's science award, was gone. And so were the 3 drawings of Diane. One was Lena's rendering of their pie baking days. Stick figures, flower clouds, one labeled Guillerme in blocky pink letters. Gone. Another had shown their hands, traced and cut out. Hers wrinkled, Lena's tiny, holding tight. Gone. Diane didn't touch the fridge. She just looked at it once, then walked out. Jules opened the door barefoot, apron streaked with tomato sauce, a wooden spoon still in hand. "You're early." "I needed to be around something real," Diane said. Jules laughed. "Real as lasagna and wine from a bottle shaped like a violin." Dinner was quiet and good. No questions, no plans. Just 2 women who had known each other long enough to eat in silence when they needed to. The kind of company that doesn't press. When Diane stood to leave, Jules hugged her tight at the door and whispered, "You've already won more than they realize." Diane smiled. "They don't know what I've taken back. Not yet." The next morning, Hank filed the injunction. Filed October 16th. Harper v. Carpenter, petition to block unauthorized real estate transaction. The clerk stamped it at 9:23 a.m. By noon, it was locked in the county system. By 4:00 p.m., the title company had called Diane back. "We've frozen the sale process until further notice. You were correct." That evening, Diane parked 3 houses down. She waited until dusk settled, when porch lights flickered on like blinking eyes and sprinkler systems hissed across trimmed lawns. Then she walked up the familiar drive. No luggage, no keys, just a folded piece of paper in her hand. She stepped inside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and dryer sheets. Not cinnamon, not home. In the hallway, She ran her fingers lightly across the banister Jim had sanded himself. In the dining room, she paused at the spot where Lena once built a blanket fort under the table, calling it Grandma's Castle. She stood still in the guest room doorway, where the boxes had been marked DH, where she'd been labeled visitor in her own life. Finally, she placed the folded paper, a printed copy of the injunction, on the kitchen counter. Neat, centered, next to the cold coffee maker. No note, no threat, just presence. The knock came before sunrise. 3 sharp raps. Measured, angry. Diane opened the door halfway, already knowing the silhouette behind it. Mark, in a wrinkled button-down, eyes bloodshot, jaw flexing like he was chewing through restraint. "You think this is funny," he snapped. "You think humiliating us in front of a realtor makes you some kind of hero?" Diane blinked once, slow. "You received the injunction." "Of course I did. You're suing your own daughter." "I'm enforcing ownership," she said evenly. "You tried to sell what isn't yours." "That's our house." She met his eyes. "No, it's my home. You've been living in it." He stepped forward, voice cracking. "You're tearing this family apart." The words hit the air like something rehearsed, a performance line. Diane almost smiled. "The family was already apart, Mark. You just preferred it that way, as long as I stayed useful and invisible." He flushed. "You're unbelievable." She stayed calm, one hand resting on the door. That's what happens when people stop believing lies. Behind him, the morning light caught on Tracy's figure at the end of the driveway, arms folded across her chest, face pale and tired. She wasn't shouting, she never shouted, but Diane could see the tremor in her hands even from the porch. "Please," Tracy said quietly, "just give us a little more time." Diane turned to her. "You've had 5 years. I gave you that time." Tracy swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for it to." "Yes, you did," Diane said. "Not cruel, just true. You wanted comfort. You wanted control. You can't have both." The silence stretched. A lawnmower started somewhere down the street. A sprinkler hissed to life. The normal world carried on, oblivious. Lena's small face appeared in the upstairs window. She wasn't crying, just watching. Her hands were pressed flat to the glass. The raccoon plush was tucked under her arm. Diane met her granddaughter's gaze. Didn't wave, didn't break eye contact. Just held it long enough to say everything words couldn't. "This isn't your fault. I'm still here." Then she turned back to Mark. "Tell your lawyer to contact Hank. You'll get the paperwork next week." Mark's voice pitched higher, losing its practiced calm. "You're destroying her. Do you even care what this does to Lena?" Diane took a step back inside, her expression unreadable. "I care that she sees what self-respect looks like." The screen door eased shut between them, clicked once. For a moment, Mark just stood there, breathing hard, fists clenching at his sides. Then he moved, fast, down the steps, out to the driveway, shouting something low and ugly that the wind tore away before it reached her fully. Through the small pane of glass, she watched him pace near the mailbox, red-faced, throwing his arms in the air. Tracy trailed behind him, trying to calm him down, her voice too thin to matter. A neighbor across the street pretended to check their mail, pretending not to look. Mark's voice finally rose, clear this time. "You can rot in that dump of yours, Diane." She didn't respond. Instead, she reached for her keys. The screen door creaked open again, and she walked calmly past them both, past the tension, past the driveway, where Mark's anger had nowhere left to land. She unlocked her car, slid behind the wheel, and started the engine. As she backed out, she didn't look in the rearview mirror, but through the windshield, she caught sight of the upstairs window again. Lena, still standing there, still watching. Diane lifted one hand briefly from the steering wheel, palm out. Not a wave, a promise. The drive back to her apartment was long but steady. No music, no talk radio. Just the low hum of the road beneath her and the morning light widening over the horizon. The kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. When she reached the Harbor Inn, she parked, took the welcome mat from the passenger seat, and carried it inside. The room was cleaner now, more hers. The single mug, the photo of Lena, the half-read book on the nightstand. She laid the mat down right in front of her door, frayed edges, faded letters and all. Hello, still faint, half gone. She pressed it flat with her foot, smoothing the corners. A knock echoed faintly from the hallway. A neighbor passing by, maybe maintenance. It didn't matter. Diane stepped back, looked at the mat, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Outside, a new envelope slid under her door. County seal. Official letterhead. She bent down, picked it up, and read the first line. Notice of hearing. Petition for partition settlement. November 4th, 9 rocks a.m. Diane folded the letter carefully, set it on the table beside the mug, and whispered to the quiet room. Let's finish this. The hearing was short, cleaner than anyone expected. Hank handled everything. Diane sat 2 seats behind him in a soft gray cardigan, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched, calm as a late tide rolling in. Across the aisle, Mark whispered furiously to his lawyer, his tie askew, jaw working overtime. Tracy sat beside him, hair perfectly curled, smile tight and practiced for anyone who might be watching. Her fingers never stopped moving, adjusting her sleeve, twisting her ring, smoothing her skirt. When the judge asked for evidence of Mark's counterclaim, that Diane's title had been invalid, that she'd abandoned the property, Hank didn't even blink. He handed over 3 documents. The original deed, the 2020 property tax record with Diane's contribution noted, the notarized letter from the title company acknowledging her majority ownership. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the bailiff breathe. Judge Leland scanned the papers slowly, then looked up. Counterclaim denied. Just that. 1 line, 1 sentence. Diane didn't smile. She didn't need to. By noon, the news had trickled through the cul-de-sac. That afternoon, Jules called from her car, voice tinny through speakerphone. They're already spinning it, she said. Tracy told Margie that you're not well, that this is, quote, complicated by grief and confusion. Diane stood in her hotel kitchenette, watching the rain tap gently against the window. She always did prefer pity to accountability, she murmured. They're not just losing property, Jules said. They're losing cover. You were their alibi, Di. Their prop, their whole look at us being good family people performance. Now it's just them, Diane said softly. Jules hesitated, then added, Margie didn't buy it, by the way. She said, and I quote, Diane always seemed like the most stable one in that whole damn house. That got a laugh. Diane actually laughed. Later that week, Diane sat at a small wooden desk in the office of her new attorney, a woman this time. She signed the last page of the updated will and handed it over. All clean? She asked. Crystal, the attorney replied. Full asset transfer, including your claim to Winmere. Upon passing, all property, assets, and holdings will go to your granddaughter, Lena Harper. No contingencies? None. Diane nodded once. Good. She didn't need Tracy or Mark's permission to make that decision. Not anymore. She just needed a signature, and hers still held weight. She celebrated by walking the long aisles of a local open house. It was a white clapboard craftsman on the edge of town, with a wide front porch and a creaky swing that groaned like it remembered better decades. The agent, young, overly rehearsed, trailed behind her offering specs. Refinished kitchen, 3 beds, 2 full baths, wood-burning fireplace, brand new AC. Is the swing included? Diane asked, nodding toward the porch. The agent blinked. It could be. I'm sure the sellers would negotiate that. Diane stepped onto the porch, letting her hand brush the wood rail. It felt warm in the sunlight. Real, uncomplicated. She sat down. The swing moved gently beneath her. Out front, traffic rolled past slowly. A dog barked. Somewhere in a nearby yard, someone was grilling. She didn't need much anymore, not rooms filled with other people's energy, not square footage to prove she mattered, just a front porch, somewhere a child could run to, somewhere a pie could cool by the window without being ignored. She stayed there for a long time. That night, she returned to the Harbor Inn. The welcome mat greeted her like an old friend. Hello, worn and honest. Diane stepped inside, turned on the lamp, and reached for her tea kettle. Before the water boiled, her phone buzzed. It wasn't Tracy, not Mark. Lena. From her own number this time, one photo. It was a picture of a new drawing, stick figures under a tree. Diane was in the middle, arms open, the raccoon plush in Lena's hand. Beneath it, a caption in purple marker. "Can I come stay with you sometime?" Diane stared at it, a hand over her mouth, then typed one line in return. "I'm getting a porch swing just for you." Diane opened the door to find Lena standing there with a backpack that sagged heavy on her shoulders and the raccoon plush poking out of the top. Her shoelaces were mismatched. Her hair was a little tangled. Her face was calm in that too-old way children wear when they have been walking through storms they didn't cause. "I didn't run away," Lena said. Diane didn't ask. She stepped aside and opened her arms. Lena walked in without another word. Dinner was quiet, spaghetti and green beans. Nothing fancy. Lena ate every bite. Diane didn't press her with questions. She didn't pry or reach for answers she already sensed. She just sat beside her, nodding once when Lena asked for more Parmesan. Halfway through her second helping, Lena spoke without looking up. "They fight about you all the time. In the kitchen, in the garage. They whisper like I can't hear it, but I always hear it." Diane kept her eyes on the table. "That must be hard." "I just want quiet," Lena said, finally looking up. Not even happy, just quiet. Diane reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then that's what we'll have tonight." The next morning, the Harbor Inn smelled like pancakes and cinnamon. Lena stood on a step stool, flipping batter with surprising confidence. Diane hovered just behind her, hands at the ready but never interfering. The radio played softly in the background, oldies, no talking heads, no weather reports. Just the soft comfort of voices long gone. They made a game of stacking the pancakes by height. 5, 6, 7. "Too wobbly," Lena giggled. "This one's for engineers," Diane smiled. "Then we'll eat it like architects." At 9:14 a.m., Diane stepped outside with her phone. She sat on the concrete steps near the parking lot. The autumn air sharp and clear. She dialed. Mark answered on the third ring. "Where the hell is she?" "She showed up last night," Diane said evenly. "No drama, no damage. Just a backpack. Why didn't you call?" "I'm calling now." "You don't get to decide." "She's safe here," Diane said, cutting him off without raising her voice. "You can pick her up in the morning." A pause. Then Mark, his voice quieter but no less cold. "I hope you know what this looks like." "I do," Diane said. "I hope you do too." She ended the call. Tracy's text came 20 minutes later. "You couldn't wait, could you? Always finding a way to be the victim and the savior in the same breath. You're manipulating her, twisting things. I see it now." Diane didn't reply. She placed the phone face down on the windowsill and returned to the kitchen, where Lena was drawing with marker on the back of a diner menu. The drawing was of the Harbor Inn, simplified and square, but unmistakable. One big window, a crooked smile drawn on the door. The welcome mat was labeled Grandma's house. Lena was still coloring in the sky when she said, "I wish I lived with you." Diane set down her mug. "Maybe one day," she said softly. "Really?" "I'm not saying no." Lena's eyes stayed on the page. "They keep telling me who to love, who to listen to, but they don't listen to me." Diane touched her hand gently. "I do." That night, Diane stood outside Lena's door at the Harbor Inn. She'd pushed the two chairs together, laid the spare blanket across them like a tent. Lena had fallen asleep inside it, one hand clutching her raccoon, the other still loosely holding her marker. Diane didn't move her. She just watched the soft rise and fall of her breath. The fragile piece of a child too used to navigating adult weather. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt chosen. And that was more than enough. Her phone buzzed again, another text. This one wasn't from Tracy. It was from Hank. "Just a heads up. They filed for temporary custody restrictions. Probably trying to scare you. Let me know if you want to respond or wait." Diane read it twice, then looked back at Lena, asleep beneath the makeshift tent, light from the hallway pooling softly around her. No fear, just resolve. She walked to the window, drew the curtain slightly open, and whispered, "Let them try." The ruling came on a Wednesday morning. Diane didn't attend in person. She didn't need to. Hank had it covered, just like he always did. efficient, unshakable, quiet in the way that made opposing counsel sweat. By 10:34 a.m., he called. Judge gave them 30 days. Either they buy you out or they vacate. Clean decision, ironclad. Diane didn't exhale with relief. She had already accepted every outcome. What do you want to do? Hank asked. She didn't hesitate. I'll take the buyout. Sure? Clean breaks heal faster. The money landed in her account 4 days later. No ceremony, just numbers on a screen. But it felt heavier than any windfall, because it wasn't a gift. It was what was owed. That afternoon, Diane signed the final purchase papers on the small cottage she'd visited twice, but never spoken about to anyone except Jules. 2 bedrooms, old bones, wide windows that caught morning light, and a porch swing that didn't creak but sighed when you sat in it, like it had been waiting. Jules brought wine and a toolbox. Together, they hung string lights across the front porch, wrapping the beams with gold and amber glow. Jules lined the kitchen drawers with fresh paper, while Diane filled the fridge with butter, apples, and a full gallon of whole milk, Lena's favorite. They chose soft rugs. Diane picked a deep blue for the living room, something ocean dark and grounding. Jules insisted on one ridiculous throw pillow shaped like a cat in sunglasses. In the bedroom, Diane hung up exactly 8 things: 2 cardigans, a soft flannel robe, and 5 cotton tops she actually liked. She didn't need more. The pie dish went up last. She almost didn't hang it. Its chipped edge had been taped for years, but the crack was permanent, scarring across the ceramic in a jagged loop. Jules held it while Diane stared at the kitchen wall, unsure. Finally, Diane pointed to a hook above the stove. That one, she said. Jules nodded, hammered it in, and hung the dish with care. They stood in silence, both looking at it like it was a photograph from a past life. Not something broken, something carried forward. Later that night, Diane checked her email. One new message. From Mark Carpenter. Subject: wire transfer. Confirmed body, funds received. Thanks for making this easier than it had to be. Best of luck. Diane read it once. Then she hovered over the trash icon. Clicked. Didn't reply. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the cottage, catching on the welcome mat she'd moved from the Harbor Inn. Washed now, still frayed, still hers. Hello? Barely legible. She brewed coffee, cut an apple into thin slices, and opened the front door. The porch swing waited. She sat, coffee balanced on one knee, sun warming her face. She didn't feel uprooted or replaced. She felt anchored. The wind picked up slightly. A car passed in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked and was told to hush. And Diane, for the first time in years, didn't feel like she was taking up space that didn't want her. She felt the opposite, like the space had been waiting for her. Then, a buzz. Text message. From a number labeled Lena, personal. Just one sentence. Can I bring my raccoon to see the porch swing? Diane smiled. Wide and full and easy. She didn't answer yet. Instead, she looked out over her new lawn, then back at the swing beneath her, and whispered, I hope you do. The envelope came folded twice, tucked into a piece of construction paper that had been decorated with glittery sticker stars and a hand-drawn raccoon. There was no return address, just Lena's handwriting on the back flap. For Grandma, private. Diane read it at the kitchen table, sun pouring through the window behind her, warming the floor tiles and her bare feet. She opened it carefully, like it might disintegrate if she moved too fast. The essay was for school, 5th grade prompt. Write about someone who taught you something important. Lena's handwriting had gotten smaller, tidier since the last letter. My grandma showed me that you can leave and still love someone. She didn't yell or fight. She just left in a way that made me realize she still wanted better for everyone. People said she was mad, but she was just tired. People said she was unfair, but they never gave her credit for staying as long as she did. She showed me that peace doesn't have to be loud to be real, and that even when you lose a house, you don't lose a home if you carry the person who made it feel safe. Diane had to stop halfway through. She folded the page, pressed it to her chest, and closed her eyes. Later, she took down the frame that had held an old photo of her and Jim from 1993. One of those quick mid-laugh snapshots taken by a stranger at a lake in Michigan. She tucked the photo away in a drawer and replaced it with Lena's essay. It went on the wall above the pie dish, cracks and all. 2 weeks passed. The leaves turned brittle. Porch pumpkins began to rot on neighbors' steps. Diane added a quilt to the porch swing and started drinking her coffee with a splash of cream instead of just black. Then Jules called. "He's gone," she said. "Who?" "Mark. Company transferred him to Arizona. Packed up the family last weekend." Diane raised an eyebrow. "No goodbye?" Jules hesitated. "Not even to the lawn. I drove by. House is already listed." Diane stared out the window. "Let it be listed," she said. And that was all. The next day she checked her social media for the first time in months. Tracy was gone. Not deactivated, just gone. Unfriended, blocked. Erased in that clean, quiet way only people who think they're winning tend to execute. Diane stared at the blank space where her daughter's profile used to sit. No message, no dramatic exit, just that one small act of digital finality. She closed the app, deleted it from her phone. Some things didn't need updating anymore. Thursday afternoons, Diane began walking the 5 blocks to the local library, where a group of kids gathered in the back room for the weekly reading circle. The first time she went, she sat in the back just to observe. The second time, she brought Charlotte's Web and read the chapter about the web that spelled some pig. The third time, a little boy named Milo asked to sit in her lap. By the 5th week, she had her own name tag, Ms. Diane, Reading Friend. The welcome mat now sat inside the front door, just past the threshold. She liked it better that way, protected. Not a greeting to the outside, but a reminder for herself. Hello, still faded but visible, still standing. One Saturday, as she came back from the farmer's market with 2 pears and a small cinnamon candle, she paused at the threshold and touched the corner of the mat with her foot. No one had crossed it today, but it still meant something. That night, she got a video from Lena, just 30 seconds. The camera showed a small swing set behind someone's townhouse, autumn leaves scattered around it. Lena stepped into frame holding the raccoon plush, then looked at the screen and said, "I miss you, and guess what? I told my teacher I want to do another essay. This time about where peace lives." She leaned closer. "I said it lives on a porch swing, in a cottage, with a dish that makes the best pie in the world." The video ended. Diane stared at the screen, heart full in a quiet, aching way. She whispered, "You're the one who knows best." The folding chairs creaked as the last few people settled in. It wasn't a big auditorium, just a community center room with tile floors and dim lights that hummed faintly. On one wall, a banner read, "Voices of Change, Everyday Women and the Homes They Reclaim." Diane adjusted the mic slightly. It squealed once, then went quiet. She looked out at the faces, middle-aged women, younger ones too, a few men, some arms crossed in skepticism, others leaning forward. Jules sat in the back row, legs crossed, arms relaxed, her smile small but steady. Diane cleared her throat once, then spoke. "I used to think ownership meant possession, but it doesn't, not really. Ownership is participation. It's showing up even when you're erased. It's baking a pie no one eats and cleaning a kitchen you're no longer thanked for. And sometimes, ownership means leaving. Not to give up, but to refuse to be held hostage in places where only your silence is welcomed." The room stayed still, not tense, just listening. "I lived in a house I helped pay for, a house I helped hold together. And one day, my own daughter called me a guest. But I wasn't a guest. I was a builder. And builders don't ask permission to take back their tools." Someone in the 3rd row exhaled sharply, like they'd been holding their breath. "When I left, I didn't shout, I didn't burn bridges. I walked away with exactly what was mine. My time, my presence, my name on a deed, and my worth. And now I live in a smaller house. It smells like cinnamon. The welcome mat is inside." She paused. Let that last line land. Then added softer, "And there's room on the porch swing for anyone who chooses peace." The applause didn't explode. It rose, like water lifting slowly in a basin until it was full and inevitable. People nodded. One woman in the 2nd row mouthed, "Thank you." Jules stood first, clapped loudest. Diane didn't bow, just smiled, stepped back from the mic, and returned to her seat. No podium needed to keep her steady now. The next morning, the smell of baked apples and brown sugar filled the cottage. Diane moved with quiet precision, rolling dough, slicing fruit, crimping edges like muscle memory. The kitchen felt full, even though no one else was in it. 2 pies sat on the counter by noon. One went into the fridge, labeled in Lena's handwriting from a sleepover 2 weeks back. Do not touch, for swing days only. The other cooled on the windowsill. She brewed coffee, sat at the table, pulled out her journal and wrote, "Leaving doesn't always mean losing." She underlined it twice, closed the notebook. At 2:12 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Diane wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened it, expecting a package or maybe jewels. Instead, it was a man in his 50s, balding slightly, windbreaker zipped to the neck. He held a box of hardware supplies under one arm. "Hi," he said sheepish. "I'm from 2 streets over. Name's Bill." Diane nodded. "Hi, Bill." He glanced behind her as if confirming the porch swing was real. "You're the lady who took her house back, right?" Diane leaned against the doorframe, one brow raised. "Depends who's asking," he grinned. "My sister was at your talk yesterday. She hasn't stopped quoting you, said you made quiet sound dangerous." Diane laughed, low and real. "Good. Quiet should be." He looked like he wanted to say more, but just nodded. "Well, just wanted to say you've got a good porch, best one on the block." "Come by sometime," Diane said. "We've got pie for that." As he walked away, she stepped back inside, closed the door, looked down. The welcome mat was still there, inside the door, firm, unmoving. It didn't need to greet anyone else. It had already greeted her. It took less than 30 minutes to sign the new estate plan, a single afternoon. One witness, a notary with warm eyes and a lavender ink pen. When it was done, Diane folded the copy carefully, tucked it into a folder labeled "If I'm Gone," and slid it into the top drawer of her desk beneath the bundle of Lena's letters. Half of everything, cash, equity, personal effects, was marked for a local housing relief fund for displaced women over 50. The other half was tagged in bold letters to Lena Harper for education, housing, and peace. No trust fund drama, no loopholes, just intent and action. Jules came over with 2 lavender plants in plastic buckets and a bag of mulch slung over her shoulder. "We're grounding this place properly," she said, already pulling on gloves. The front garden bed was mostly bare, just a few patches of soil and some leftover mulch from the previous owner. Diane watched her friend dig the first hole, then grabbed a second trowel and joined her. The sun was sharp that afternoon, cutting through the cool breeze. As they worked, Diane said, "Lavender's resilient." Jules grinned. "So are you." They planted the roots deep, gave them space, then patted the earth down gently. Before they went inside, Diane whispered something to the lavender. She never said what. Once a month, usually on Sundays, with her second cup of coffee, Diane reread Lena's first essay. The copy she framed above the pie dish stayed untouched. But the folded original lived in her journal. She never read it aloud. She didn't need to. The rhythm of Lena's voice lived in her now, like a breath she could summon without trying. A week after her community center speech, a young reporter emailed. She was writing a series on quiet power, ordinary women, extraordinary courage, and wanted to feature Diane. Diane stared at the message for nearly an hour before responding. "Thank you for asking. I've said enough. But if you're ever in town, I make a good apple pie. Sincerely, Diane Harper." Then she boxed up a still warm pie with a handwritten card. Quiet doesn't mean absent. She shipped it overnight. Later that evening, she logged into her Wi-Fi router to reset the password. She'd been meaning to all week. In the name field, she typed, "Still welcome, here no punctuation, just truth." She saved the change, closed her laptop, and sat outside on the porch swing as the sun melted into soft gold over the street. Lena would be back next weekend. They'd already made plans. She wanted to try planting basil like the TikTok videos, and Diane had saved a spot in the garden for it. They'd bake and swing and maybe reread Charlotte's Web. Diane didn't know what the future looked like beyond that weekend. She didn't need to. For now, she had lavender in the soil, a pie cooling on the counter, and a journal with no empty pages. Only room left to keep going. The porch lights clicked on as the sky darkened. Diane stood up from the swing, brushed the dust from her hands, and stepped inside. The welcome mat behind her caught the light for just a second. Hello, still faded, but never erased. The subject line read, just wanted to say, no name, no greeting, just that. Sitting there in Diane's inbox like a half-wrapped apology no one asked for. She clicked it anyway, read it once, then again, slower. I know things didn't end the way anyone wanted. I've had time to think. I hope you're doing okay. I thought about writing sooner, but figured it wouldn't matter. Maybe it still doesn't, but I wanted to say it anyway. Tracy. No questions, no request, no ownership, not really. Just the kind of half-message people send to unburden themselves, not to connect. Diane hovered her mouse over the screen, then deleted it. Not with satisfaction, not with rage, just clarity. Like dusting a shelf you no longer look at. She didn't tell Jules, didn't mention it during their Friday walk through the plant nursery, where Jules picked out a fern too large for its pot, and Diane shook her head like a scolding sister. She didn't bring it up when Lena arrived 2 days later with a bag full of basil starters and a raccoon plush still in tow. She didn't say anything at all. Instead, she started moving furniture. The couch, the beige one she'd taken from the Winmere house, out of necessity, not affection, had sagged at one end for months. She'd always told herself she'd replace it when it fully gave out, but it hadn't. It just sat there, heavy, stubborn, reminding her of a life she no longer lived. That afternoon, she sold it for $50 to a college student who didn't care about the history stitched into the seams. The new couch was the color of ripe persimmons, soft velvet, wide arms. It made the room glow. Lena flopped onto it immediately. This feels like a couch that knows it's loved, Diane laughed. It does. By evening, the house smelled like baked apples and nutmeg. The basil had taken to the garden bed better than expected. Lena swore it was because she'd whispered good luck to the roots. They'd read 3 chapters of Charlotte's Web, and Jules had stopped by to drop off a mason jar of homemade pickles and complain about the HOA board's sudden obsession with mailbox height. No one asked Diane about her week. No one needed to. Her calendar was full now, but only with people who showed up, with hugs instead of guilt and conversation instead of correction. Reading circle, garden center, dinner with Jules, 2 Saturdays a month with Lena. No fill-ins, no maybes, just names that meant yes. Later that night, Diane sat on the porch swing in a thick cardigan, her knees tucked under a throw blanket, the last sliver of pie still warm on her plate. Inside, the new couch glowed orange in the window, framed by string lights and the distant hum of the slow jazz station she kept on low volume. She picked up her phone once, scrolled. No unread messages. Good, she set it down again. The stars were coming out, timid, pale, not shouting their presence, just being there. Diane breathed in the cold air, then leaned her head back. The porch didn't creak anymore. The swing didn't tilt. The silence didn't ache. The message came mid-morning, sandwiched between a garden center coupon and a library event reminder. From, Mark, just checking in. Hope you're well. Thought maybe we could talk sometime. Diane read it once. Didn't even open the thread. No anger, no heat, just no interest. She closed the app, dropped her phone on the counter, and returned to what she was doing, mixing flour, salt, and butter by hand. The pie crust was nearly ready. She never replied. Later that afternoon, Diane sat at the kitchen table, journal open beside her cooling pie. Her pen moved slowly. He told me I'd outstayed my welcome. I just reclaimed the door. She didn't write anything else. She closed the journal, ran her fingers along its spine, then tucked it back into the drawer beneath the folder labeled If I'm Gone. Lena arrived that evening with a duffel bag. A bag of sugar cookies shaped like leaves, and a surprise tucked into her coat pocket. Guess what I made you, she said, bouncing slightly on her toes. What? Diane asked, taking her coat. Lena reached into her hoodie and pulled out a small metal keychain. It was handmade, plastic beads strung on a loop, uneven and colorful. At the center, block letters spelled out, DIANESHOUSE for your keys, Lena said, holding it out proudly. Your house, not theirs. Diane held the keychain like it was porcelain. Her eyes stung before she could stop them. Thank you, sweetheart. Lena shrugged like it was nothing. I made it in class. I almost put Grandma's house, but I think people need to remember your name. Diane hugged her so tightly the raccoon plush got squished between them. They baked together the next morning. 2 pies, 1 apple and 1 pumpkin. Both crusts decorated with little leaf cutouts Lena had shaped herself. The kitchen windows fogged with warmth. The scent wrapped around them like memory, deep, familiar, earned. At lunch, they sliced warm bread, poured lemonade, and shared one of the pies in full. Lena said, "This is the best crust yet." Diane smiled. "You made the edges," Lena grinned. "Obviously." After Lena left Sunday evening, arms full of pie slices wrapped in foil and her raccoon tucked under one arm, Diane did something she hadn't done in months. She opened the door, picked up the welcome mat, and moved it back outside, not for invitation, for clarity. Anyone who crossed it now would know this wasn't a temporary stop or someone else's gift. It was hers. Dinner was quiet. Pasta with sautéed greens. A salad with pear slices. 1 warm roll from the bakery down the street. She ate alone, candle flickering low. No phone buzzed. No inbox pinged. No one questioned the silence. She didn't miss being needed. She welcomed being seen. After she washed the dishes, Diane stepped outside one last time. The air was cool, but not cold. The swing moved slightly in the breeze, as if nodding toward her. She looked down at the mat, at the keychain on her ring, at the door she'd once been told didn't belong to her, and she spoke. Not loud, not bitter, just true. When my son said I'd outstayed my welcome, I left quietly. 2 weeks later, he learned the welcome mat and the house were mine.